Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take complex information, break it down, and uncover the most important insights for you. Today we're embarking on a really crucial deep dive. We're looking at the declassified CIA Tradecraft Review concerning the 2016 Intelligence Community Assessment on Russian election interference. And we're pairing that with key findings from the Special Counsel's investigation, the Wheeler Report. Our mission today is clear. With these significant documents out, what can we as citizens truly learn? Learn about how intelligence gets gathered, how information flows, or maybe doesn't flow, and really what happened during that pivotal moment in our recent history. We'll explore the procedural challenges, the insidious nature of foreign interference, and that whole intricate web of contacts. We want to help you cut through the noise and become truly well-informed about the lessons learned here, lessons that are still incredibly relevant, to how you consume news and evaluate information today.
Indeed. And these documents, they offer a rare, really invaluable window into the inner workings of intelligence analysis and also the dynamics of these high-stakes political investigations. We'll examine not just the what happened, but the why. Why were certain decisions made? And critically, how did those processes influence the perception and the ultimate outcome of major events? What's fascinating here, I think, is how seemingly small procedural choices, like how a document gets reviewed, can have this huge cascading effect on public trust and understanding. It really underscores just how vital transparency and rigorous methods are in intelligence work that impacts all of us.
Absolutely. So let's unpack this, starting with the CIA's own look back at its 2016 assessment. What did they learn about their own process?
The Intelligence Community Assessment, a look under the hood.
Okay, first, let's set the scene a bit. The Intelligence Community Assessment, the ICA, it was titled Russia's Influence Campaign Targeting the 2016 U.S. Presidential Election, published in a December 2016 declassified version out January 6, 2017. Now, this wasn't just any report, right? This was the joint assessment, CIA, FBI, NSA, and they concluded with high confidence that Russia had intervened. Intervened to assist Trump's candidacy and harm Clinton's electability. It really became a foundational document for understanding the alleged interference. But how exactly was it created?
Well, you're right. It was highly anticipated. And understandably, it generated just a massive amount of public interest, really shaping narratives for years. But what this recent CIA Tradecraft Review reveals is the internal process behind such a high-profile assessment and how that process itself came under, intense scrutiny internally. It's essentially rigorous self-evaluation by the CIA, asking themselves, how well did we actually do under all that pressure, and what could have been done better? This internal review gives us valuable, maybe even sobering insights into the complexities and pressures in intelligence analysis, especially when the stakes are just so high and the political implications are so profound. It's a rare look behind the curtain, for sure.
And the Tradecraft Review, it identified several procedural issues that, without a clear operational need for such speed, created vulnerabilities and open lines of inquiry about potential bias. This is where that internal self-reflection starts to expose the pressures within the system, isn't it? What exactly were these procedural problems?
Yeah, the review highlighted that the process for that 2016 ICA was definitely accelerated. They had a compressed review time of just a handful of days during a holiday week. Can you imagine the logistics? The report actually describes drafts being literally hand-carried between various IC offices and buildings during that critical holiday period.
Wow, hand-carried.
Hand-carried. And it wasn't just an inconvenience, This severely limited the ability for any substantial edits or refinement. It favored quick precision over really thorough presentation. It potentially led to less robust analysis. It's like trying to build a complex puzzle, in a dark room with half the pieces missing. Speed often comes at the cost of being meticulous.
So beyond just the rush, what were some of these significant deviations from standard procedure that the review called out? Like, what was the real impact of, say, the complete exclusion of key intelligence agencies? They mentioned the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, and the State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, INR. What unique perspectives might have been lost there?
That's a really crucial question. The review explicitly notes coordination opportunities were severely limited. It led to the complete exclusion of these key agencies, and this was unequivocally called a significant deviation from typical IC practices. The DIA, for instance, usually provides military intelligence, unique insights into foreign military capabilities and tensions, and INR its state. They offer political and diplomatic intelligence, often with a broader context on foreign relations. Excluding them meant losing diverse analytical perspectives that might have challenged or enriched the assessment. It could have led to a less comprehensive, maybe even a slightly skewed view. And this raises an important question for you as citizens. When these critical national investments are being made, how transparent, how inclusive should the process really be? The review explicitly states that a more measured approach with expanded time for review and wider input would have better adhered to standard intelligence tradecraft practices. And it adds, it could have potentially deflected questions about White House motivations. It underscores that procedural integrity is just as crucial as the findings themselves, especially when intelligence findings have such profound political implications and directly impact public trust. It's a powerful reminder that the process of intelligence gathering and analysis is just as important as the product.
But amidst these procedural issues, one particular inclusion in the ICA became a real lightning rod for criticism, didn't it? And the Tradecraft Review, well, it pulled no punches in addressing it. The infamous Steele dossier. Tell us about its role.
Yeah, the review is explicit. It states the decision by agency heads to include the Steele dossier ran counter to fundamental tradecraft principles, and it ultimately undermined the credibility of a key judgment. It wasn't just the reviewer saying this after the fact. The ICA authors themselves and multiple senior CIA managers, including the 2 senior leaders of the CIA Mission Center responsible for Russia, they strongly opposed including the dossier. They asserted it did not meet even the most basic tradecraft standards. This wasn't a minor disagreement. It shows a clear, forceful internal struggle over its perceived quality and reliability. Intelligence professionals had serious reservations.
And didn't the CIA's Deputy Director for Analysis, the DDA, actually warn Director Brennan about this?
Yes, in an email. December 29, 2016, warned that including it in any form risked the credibility of the entire paper. That's a stark warning, right? From a high-ranking official about potential damage to the whole assessment's integrity. Precisely. And despite these strong objections, the review notes that Brennan showed a preference for narrative consistency over analytical soundness. He seemed more swayed by the dossier's general conformity with existing theories than by legitimate tradecraft concerns. So ultimately, the dossier was included, but only as a 2-page summary annex with a disclaimer stating the material was not used to reach the analytic conclusions. However, and this is key, the review found that by referencing the annex in the main body as a supporting bullet for the judgment that Putin aspired to help Trump win, well, it implicitly elevated unsubstantiated claims to the status of credible supporting evidence, compromising the analytical integrity of the judgment.
So even with the disclaimer.
Exactly. It raises critical questions about how unverified information, even with caveats, can subtly influence a formal assessment and public perception. It's a powerful lesson in how information can be presented in ways that might mislead, maybe not intentionally, but just by association or context.
Okay, but the review wasn't all negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
It did mention some strong points in the ICA's tradecraft, too.
Absolutely, it's important to note that. The tradecraft review wasn't entirely critical. It highlighted strong tradecraft examples within the ICA showing balance. The review found that much of the ICA's tradecraft to be robust and consistent with Intelligence Community Directive ICD 203 analytic standards. That's the main guide for analytic products in the IC. The assessment's analytic rigor was evident in its extensive sourcing. We're talking 173 separate reports from CIA, NSA, and FBI, plus 74 citations from open sources. That's a lot of underpinning material. It also showed strong adherence to standards through frequent use of attributive language, explicit identification of intelligence gaps, and clear statements of confidence levels. In these areas, it actually exceeded most IC assessments.
So it wasn't a wholesale dismissal. There were areas of strong tradecraft. But for the average citizen, how do we reconcile that nuance? How do we hold intelligence agencies accountable for flaws while still appreciating the rigor where it exists?
That's the core challenge, isn't it? The review concludes that while it identified specific procedural and tradecraft issues with the one judgment, meaning the Steele dossier inclusion, these shouldn't be seen as indicative of broader systemic problems in the IC's analytic processes or standards. It offers a nuanced view. It reminds us that an imperfect process on one specific aspect doesn't necessarily invalidate the entire system, but it does highlight areas for improvement and public accountability. For you as citizens, this is a crucial lesson. Understanding the complexity, the inherent human element in even highly technical intelligence work, and why it's important to understand how conclusions are reached, not just what they are. It means we have to engage with these reports not as, black and white declarations, but as products of a complex system with its own strengths and vulnerabilities.
Russia's interference, the two-pronged attack.
Okay, so we've just seen the internal struggles within the CIA trying to get their assessment right. But while they were wrestling with tradecraft, Russia was actually executing this sophisticated, multi-pronged attack on the 2016 election. Let's shift now to the Mueller report. It paints a really vivid picture of what Russia actually did and how it was far more complex than just a single hacking operation.
Exactly. The Mueller report lays it out in painstaking detail. Russia interfered through two distinct operations, often working in parallel, but with different methods, different immediate goals. First, there was the Russian Active Measures social media campaign. This was carried out by the Internet Research Agency, the IRA, you remember that?
The troll farm.
Basically, yeah. Funded by Yevgeny Prigozhin and his conquered companies, effectively a state-sponsored operation. The IRA's goal, initially anyway, was pretty broad, just sow discord in the U.S. political system. They called it information warfare, starting back in 2014, 2015. They were looking to stir the pot, polarize, divide American society along existing fault lines. It wasn't immediately about targeting a specific candidate.
But the report details how that strategy evolved, right? By early 2016, this campaign evolved to a targeted operation that favored candidate Trump and disparaged candidate Clinton. What specific tactics did the IRA use to achieve that targeted influence?
Oh, they went way beyond just posting nasty comments. The IRA bought political advertisements on social media in the names of U.S. persons and entities, often hiding their Russian origin. They even orchestrated political rallies inside the United States, coordinating these events through their fake online personas.
Really? Actual rallies?
Yes. To do this, IRA employees posed as U.S. grassroots entities and persons. They contacted American political activists, even some unwitting Trump campaign officials. They created tons of social media groups. Some look like pro-Trump Facebook groups, like one called Being Patriotic. Others posed as Black social justice groups, Black Matters, Blacktivists, or LGBTQ groups like LGBT United. The aim wasn't just spreading a message, it was weaponizing division. They designed these groups to amplify existing ideological splits, fostering distrust, cynicism in the whole democratic process.
Like a puppet show, you said earlier.
Exactly, where the strings are invisible and the audience thinks the puppets are real people arguing. It's important to note, though, the investigation, quote, did not identify evidence that any U.S. persons conspired or coordinated with the IRA.
Okay, so Americans might have interacted, but unknowingly.
Right. They weren't knowingly part of a Russian op, based on the evidence found.
At the same time, Russia employed a second, more direct kind of interference: cyber intrusions, hacking. Carried out by the GRU, Russia's military intelligence agency. This was the more technical, clandestine side of their operations, targeting the campaign infrastructure itself.
Right. In March 2016, the GRU started hacking email accounts of Clinton campaign volunteers and employees, including campaign chairman John Podesta.
Yeah.
By April 2016, they'd infiltrated the computer networks of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DCCC, and the Democratic National Committee, the DNC. They stole hundreds of thousands of documents. This was a significant theft of highly sensitive political information, way beyond casual snooping.
What kind of data?
Internal communications, opposition research, strategic plans, the kind of stuff that could really influence public perception if it got out.
And the release of this stolen material was highly strategic, wasn't it? The GRU used fake online personas, DeepSeek, and Guccifer 2.0 to release documents, but then, significantly, they released more material through WikiLeaks, and the report points out that timing. WikiLeaks started releasing Podesta's emails on October 7, 2016, which was less than 1 hour after a U.S. media outlet released video considered damaging to candidate Trump. That timing certainly seems noteworthy.
It really highlights the sophisticated, multi-layered nature of modern state-sponsored interference. It wasn't just about generating propaganda on social media. It was about weaponizing information stolen through illegal means and strategically timing its release to maximize impact, dominate the news cycle, often diverting attention from bad news for one side or amplifying negative stories about the other. For you, as citizens, understanding these methods, the mix of social media manipulation and targeted hacking and leaking is crucial. Crucial for identifying and resisting foreign influence in how you consume information, especially today when information spreads so fast online, often without clear origin or agenda. It's a powerful reminder that not all information you see, even if it looks legitimate, originates authentically.
The campaign in Russia links, not coordination.
Okay, so one of the most critical aspects of the Mueller investigation was this question: was there collusion or coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government? The report makes a very specific, legally important distinction here. And it's vital for us as citizens to understand that distinction.
Absolutely. The special counsel's office knew collusion was the term everyone used publicly. It carries broad implications. But in federal criminal law, the focus is on conspiracy. Sure. And for coordination, the specific term in the special counsel's appointment order, the office understood it to require an agreement, tacit or express, between the Trump campaign and the Russian government on election interference.
An agreement, that's the key word.
Exactly. The definition is crucial. It requires more than the two parties taking actions that were informed by or responsive to the other's actions or interests. In other words, just having shared interests or acting in parallel ways wasn't enough for coordination. An actual agreement was needed. And the investigation did not establish that the Trump campaign coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. However, and this is the important nuance, it did identify numerous links.
Links, not coordination.
Right. The distinction is between a provable crime, like conspiracy or illegal coordination, and interactions that might be concerning or ethically questionable, but don't meet that high legal bar. Understanding that difference is key for the public.
Okay, so let's look at some of those key contacts and incidents investigated as potential links, starting with the Trump Tower Moscow project. This was an early point of contact, predating some of the more public events.
Yeah, the report details these early contacts. Related to a Trump Organization real estate project, Trump Tower Moscow, candidate Trump signed a letter of intent by November 2015, and his executive, Michael Cohen, emailed and spoke about the project with the Office of Russian Government Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov in January 2016. This wasn't just a fleeting idea. The Trump Organization actively pursued this project through at least June 2016. They even considered travel to Russia by Cohen and Trump himself for business.
While the campaign was running.
Yes, while the campaign was underway. This shows a clear, active business interest. It created a direct link between the Trump Organization and Russian government entities during the campaign. It's a reminder that political figures often have diverse interests, and sometimes those interests intersect with foreign governments in ways that later draw scrutiny.
Then there's the strange case of George Papadopoulos, a campaign foreign policy advisor, and that dirt offer in spring 2016. What was that interaction about?
Right, Papadopoulos. He made early contact with Joseph Mifsud, a London-based professor with connections to Russia. In April 2016, Mifsud told Papadopoulos the Russian government had dirt on Hillary Clinton.
Dirt in what form?
In the form of thousands of emails, a direct offer of damaging information. Papadopoulos later suggested to a foreign government representative that the Trump campaign had indications Russia could assist the campaign through anonymous information release. Now, no meeting took place between the campaign and the Russian government as a result of Papadopoulos' efforts, but it highlights an early awareness within the campaign, or at least within Papadopoulos' sphere, of Russia potentially having damaging info, and a willingness, at least from Papadopoulos, to explore getting it. It showed an openness to receiving information that could benefit the campaign, even if the source was a foreign government.
Okay, moving to the June 9, 2016 Trump Tower meeting. This is a central point, maybe one of the most publicly dissected events. Things really escalated here in terms of direct contact. Can you walk us through the lead-up? So June 3, 2016, Rob Goldstone, a publicist tied to Russian pop star Emin Agalarov, whose father, Aras Agalarov, had worked with Trump emails, Donald Trump Jr., Goldstone conveys a really unambiguous offer from Russia's crown prosecutor to provide the Trump campaign with official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary in her dealings with Russia, and that this would be very useful to Trump Jr.'s father. Goldstone even explicitly stated this was very high-level and sensitive information and part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump. Trump Jr.'s response, which we saw in the emails, was fast and direct. "If it's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer." The meeting happened just days later, attended by Trump Jr., then campaign chair Paul Manafort, and Jared Kushner, along with Russian lawyer Natalia Veselnitskaya, Emin Agalarov, and others.
Yeah, that email exchange is a clear demonstration of interest from senior campaign officials in obtaining damaging information from a foreign source, specifically framed as Russian government support for Trump. However, the report concluded the evidence was not sufficient to charge either incident as a criminal violation of campaign finance laws.
Why not? It seems pretty explicit.
They cited the substantial burden of proof on issues of intent, knowing and willful, and also the difficulty of establishing the monetary value of the offered information, which is needed for a campaign finance charge. The meeting itself, according to participants, mostly turned into a discussion about the Magnitsky Act and Russian adoptions rather than a substantive exchange of dirt.
The Magnitsky Act. Remind us what that is.
Sure. It's a U.S. law imposing sanctions on Russian officials accused of human rights abuses, freezing assets, banning travel. Russia retaliated by banning U.S. adoptions of Russian children. This was a huge point of contention for Moscow. It seems the Russian lawyer, Vizhelnitskaya, used the offer of dirt as a pretext, really, to lobby against this U.S. policy. So this whole episode serves as a critical example for you as citizens. The distinction between apparent intent, a willingness to accept foreign help, and provable criminal conduct under U.S. law. It emphasizes that while actions might seem ethically questionable, the legal standards for conviction are very high. Also, the changing story around the meeting after it went public downplaying it, then Trump Jr. releasing the emails, illustrates those efforts to manage public perception. The constant dance between facts and PR.
Okay, next link. Paul Manafort, the campaign chairman, and Konstantin Kilimnik. An individual the FBI assesses has ties to Russian intelligence. What did the report find about their interactions?
Manafort, while campaign chairman, shared internal polling data with Kilimnik. This wasn't just casual talk. The polling data included details on battleground states, voter turnout models, internal strategy, stuff that could be incredibly valuable to a foreign actor wanting to influence an election. Kilimnik also passed along a peace plan for Ukraine from the exiled former Ukrainian president Viktor Yanukovych. Manafort himself admitted this was a backdoor way for Russia to control eastern Ukraine.
Did Manafort pass that plan on to Trump?
The investigation did not uncover evidence of Manafort's passing along information about Ukrainian peace plans to the candidate or anyone else in the campaign or the administration. But, significantly, Manafort lied to the office and the grand jury about the peace plan and his meetings with Kilimnik. His unreliability on this was a reason the judge found he breached his cooperation agreement. It really highlights the challenges investigators face in getting truthful testimony and how individuals can obscure information even when supposedly cooperating.
During the Republican National Convention in July 2016, there was another interesting point related to the party platform in Ukraine. What happened there?
Right. At the convention, there was a proposed platform amendment. It called for providing lethal defensive weapons to Ukraine and keeping sanctions on Russia. This was a position many Republicans favored, seen as pushing back against Russian aggression. However, campaign staff, specifically J.D. Gordon and Matt Miller, successfully pushed to table the amendment. They objected specifically to the lethal defensive weapons language, their reasoning. They cited candidate Trump's stated positions that Europeans should take primary responsibility for Ukraine's defense and that improved U.S.-Russia relations were desired. The report notes President Trump does not recall being involved in the change. This incident shows how campaign priorities, even if they align with Russian interests, can be driven independently and don't necessarily mean coordination. Policy changes can happen through standard political processes, even if a foreign power likes the outcome.
Okay, one more link to touch on. Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Ambassador Kislyak. What did the report say about their meetings?
Jeff Sessions, when he was a senator and a Trump campaign advisor, met with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak in his Senate office in September 2016. The report states that none of the attendees remembered any discussion of Russian election interference or any request that Sessions convey information from the Russian government to the Trump campaign. End quote. However, Kislyak did call it an interesting campaign, and Sessions recalled Kislyak saying the Russian government was receptive to the overtures Trump had laid out during his campaign. So this underscores the ongoing efforts by Russian officials to engage with figures close to the campaign. It reflects standard diplomatic outreach to a rising political power, even if specific illicit coordination wasn't established. These meetings, while not proof of coordination, illustrate those continuous efforts by Russian reps to connect with the incoming political establishment.
The transition period continued engagement in unofficial channels.
Okay, so after the election, November 8, 2016, interactions between people connected to the Russian government and the incoming Trump administration didn't stop. They continued, sometimes through official channels, sometimes through unofficial ones, further blurring those lines between what's normal contact versus potentially suspicious contact. This post-election period became a new focus for investigators.
Exactly. On November 9, 2016, the very day after the election, a Russian official named Sergei Kuznetsov emailed Hope Hicks, the Trump campaign press secretary. Subject line, message from Putin. Putin's message was pretty straightforward. Congratulated Trump, said he looked forward to working with Trump on leading Russian-American relations out of crisis. This signifies an immediate desire from the very top of the Russian government to engage, which on the surface is typical diplomatic protocol after a major election. World leaders congratulate and seek engagement with new heads of state all the time.
Right, that seems standard. But not all the channels were so official or so straightforward. Let's look at Peter Aven's outreach. He tried to create a more unofficial, maybe even discreet line of communication.
Yes, Peter Aven. a wealthy Russian businessman connected to Alpha Bank. He had a one-on-one meeting with Putin in late 2016. In that meeting, Putin reportedly spoke of the difficulty faced by the Russian government in getting in touch with the incoming Trump administration. End quote. He apparently indicated a perceived lack of clear contacts. Putin supposedly said he did not know with whom formally to speak and generally did not know the people around the president-elect, unquote. So Avon then instructed Richard Burt, a former U.S. ambassador on the board of Avon's company, Letter One, to make contact with the incoming Trump administration.
Using a former ambassador as an intermediary.
Exactly. This effort was internally dubbed Project A by Burt because of the sensitivities. It was a clear attempt to establish an unofficial comms channel outside normal diplomacy. Burt even admitted later to adding hype to the reported interest from the transition team. It suggests how information can get massaged or exaggerated by intermediaries trying to create opportunities. It illustrates the complex, often unofficial ways foreign governments might seek influence, especially during political transitions when formal lines are still forming.
Then there was another interesting unofficial channel involving Eric Prince, the businessman and campaign supporter, and Kirill Dmitriev, a Russian official, meeting in the Seychelles. That sounds almost like something out of a spy novel.
It does have that feel. January 2017, just before the inauguration, Eric Prince met with Kirill Dmitriev, head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, RDIF, in the Seychelles. The meeting was reportedly arranged by George Nader, an advisor to the UAE Crown Prince. Dmitriev explicitly wanted to start rebuilding the relationship between the U.S. and Russia. Prince later told Steve Bannon, then a senior Trump advisor, about the meeting. Said Dmitriev was interested in improving relations. However, Bannon's account conflicts significantly. He claimed he never discussed with Prince anything regarding Dmitriev, RDIF, or any meetings with Russian individuals or people associated with Putin. Said he would have objected if he'd known the details.
Conflicting stories.
Right. And this conflicting testimony, plus the convenient lack of messages on either Prince's or Bannon's phones from that time, highlights the huge challenges investigators faced in nailing down facts. It raises crucial questions about accountability, record-keeping and high-level communications, or maybe the alarming lack thereof, which can really impede investigations.
Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, also had a meeting that drew scrutiny specifically with the head of a sanctioned Russian bank.
That's right. In December 2016, Jared Kushner, a key transition team member, met with Sergei Gorkov. Gorkov was head of the Russian government-owned Vneshenkon Bank, or VEB, and VEB was explicitly subject to U.S. economic sanctions at the time. The meeting was reportedly facilitated by Ambassador Kislyak. Kushner stated he did not recall any discussion during his meeting with Gorkov about the sanctions against VEB or sanctions more generally. He also said he did not engage in any preparation for the meeting.
No preparation for a meeting with the head of a sanctioned Russian state bank.
That's what he stated. This engagement with a sanctioned entity, even without a clear agenda or discussion of sanctions recalled, represents another link in the chain of contacts during the transition. It drew scrutiny because of the sensitive nature of VEB and the context of ongoing sanctions. And yes, the stated lack of preparation for such a high-stakes meeting also raised eyebrows.
Okay, perhaps the most legally significant interaction during the transition involved Michael Flynn, the incoming national security advisor, and Ambassador Kislyak. What unfolded there, and why was it so impactful?
Michael Flynn had 2 phone calls with Ambassador Kislyak in late December 2016. The timing here is absolutely critical. It was right after the Obama administration had imposed new sanctions on Russia for election interference and was also expelling Russian diplomats. During these calls, Flynn specifically asked Kislyak to refrain from escalating the situation in response to the United States' imposition of sanctions. He was basically urging Russia not to retaliate.
Undercutting the current administration's policy.
Effectively, yes. Kislyak later told Flynn that Russia had chosen not to retaliate to the sanctions in response to the request. This was a significant diplomatic exchange, a back-channel discussion on foreign policy. However, Flynn subsequently lied to incoming administration officials and, crucially, lied to the FBI about discussing sanctions on these calls. This directly highlights a false statement made by a key incoming official to federal investigators. It later became a core part of legal proceedings against him. And it raises profound questions for you as citizens about honesty and transparency at the highest levels of government, especially when those statements are made under oath to law enforcement.
Obstruction of justice, presidential actions, and legal interpretations.
All right, let's turn to Volume 2 of the Mueller report. This part delves into whether President Trump took actions that constituted obstruction of justice. This section maybe more than any other, raises complex legal and constitutional questions. Questions about the limits of presidential power and how intent plays into such serious allegations.
Exactly. The report's whole analysis of obstruction hinges on the concept of acting corruptly to obstruct justice. How do they define that? Acting with an intent to obtain an improper advantage for himself or someone else, inconsistent with official duty and the rights of others. Think of it this way. It's not just about if a president took an action, but why. Was that action driven by a selfish motive, like shielding himself from investigation, avoiding embarrassment rather than a legitimate governing purpose?
So the motivation is key.
It's the core element. It's a demanding legal standard. The report is careful to explain its approach, emphasizing that precluding corrupt official action does not diminish the president's ability to exercise Article 2 powers, unquote. For you, as citizens, this distinction is vital. Understanding the difference between legitimate policy decisions and actions potentially driven by self-interest to impede legal processes. It's a core tenet of the rule of law.
One of the most prominent events examined was, of course, the firing of FBI Director James Comey on May 9, 2017. The president had reportedly told advisors he wanted Comey to publicly state he wasn't under investigation. What was the sequence there, and what did the report find about the president's motivations?
The report details how the president had expressed that desire for Comey to clear him publicly. Then, the day after firing Comey, President Trump met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Ambassador Kislyak in the Oval Office. The media later reported, and the White House didn't deny that Trump told them, "I just fired the head of the FBI. He was crazy, a real nut job. I faced great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off. I'm not under investigation."
Said that to the Russians.
Said that directly to the Russian officials. These statements illustrate how the president perceived the impact of Comey's firing as a way to relieve pressure from the Russia investigation and clear his own name.
What about his public statements around that time?
The very next day, in a TV interview, the president acknowledged he would have fired Comey regardless of DOJ recommendations. He specifically said that when he decided to just do it, he was thinking that this thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. He also said firing Comey might even lengthen out the investigation, but the overall impression conveyed was that the dismissal was aimed at dealing with the Russia thing. This sequence, the private comments to Russians, the public statements, suggests a clear perception that firing Comey would alleviate pressure from the Russia probe. For citizens, it highlights that critical importance of scrutinizing stated reasons versus potential underlying motivations behind major government actions. Actions can have multiple interpretations, and understanding intent, especially corrupt intent, is key in legal and public evaluations.
After Comey's firing, Robert Mueller was appointed special counsel. The president reacted strongly then too, right? Telling advisors it was the end of his presidency, demanding Sessions resign. This kicked off a new, intensely scrutinized phase. What attempts did the report detail regarding efforts to curtail the special counsel investigation itself?
Yeah, the report details several concerted attempts by the president to get Mueller removed. He cited various alleged conflicts of interest. However, his advisors, including Steve Bannon and White House counsel Don McGahn, reportedly told him these supposed conflicts were ridiculous and not real. McGahn famously threatened to resign rather than carry out an order to have Mueller fired.
That's a significant moment of internal resistance.
It really is a powerful illustration of institutional checks and balances at play. White House staff resisting directives they believed were inappropriate or unfounded, serving as a critical line of defense for the legal process. It shows the importance of principled resistance within the executive branch itself. Furthermore, the president also dictated a message. He wanted former campaign manager Corey Lewandowski to deliver it to Attorney General Sessions. The message suggested Sessions should publicly announce the investigation was very unfair and that it should be limited to investigating election meddling for future elections, essentially trying to narrow its scope away from the president.
Did Lewandowski deliver the message?
No. According to the report, Lewandowski did not actually follow through with delivering the message. But these attempts trying to remove the special counsel, trying to limit the investigation's scope, they demonstrate a clear desire to influence the ongoing legal proceedings. For the public, these details matter. They help understand the extent of executive efforts to control investigations and also the pushback from within the administration. It shows the complexities of power dynamics within the White House and the justice system, and how the system, at times, resisted those pressures.
The report also meticulously looked at the president's interactions with key potential witnesses, Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen. These interactions raise significant questions about witness tampering or attempts to influence their cooperation. What did the report find there?
Okay, regarding Michael Flynn. The president sent private and public messages of support before Flynn started cooperating with the investigation. However, when Flynn's lawyer signaled he was cooperating, the president's personal counsel reportedly told Flynn's lawyer this would be interpreted as reflecting Flynn's hostility towards the president.
That sounds like pressure.
It could certainly be perceived that way, a subtle form, maybe. An attempt to influence a witness without a direct order, conveying that cooperation equals disloyalty. For Paul Manafort, the report says the president and his personal counsel made repeated statements suggesting that a pardon was a possibility for Manafort, while also making it clear the president didn't want Manafort to flip and cooperate. The president publicly called Manafort a brave man who refused to break. Such statements, made while Manafort's legal proceedings were ongoing, raised serious questions. Were they intended to deter cooperation, influence judicial outcomes, offering an implicit reward for silence, maybe a veiled threat for cooperating? And with Michael Cohen, the report highlights a really significant shift. Cohen had pursued the Trump Tower Moscow project, briefed the president multiple times. After media scrutiny hit, Cohen actively promoted a party line, distancing Trump from Russia. He later gave false testimony to Congress. Reportedly, this was after discussions with the president's personal counsel, who told him to stay on message and not contradict the president.
But then Cohen started cooperating.
Exactly. And after Cohen began cooperating with the government, the president publicly attacked him, called him a rat, suggested his family members had committed crimes. This demonstrates a clear pattern, shifting support based on a witness's cooperation, seemingly punishing those who cooperated, rewarding those who didn't.
So putting all this together, what does it mean for the complex concept of obstruction, especially involving president's actions and his broad executive powers?
Well, this whole body of evidence, this pattern of public and private statements, actions directed at investigations and witnesses, it demonstrates a clear desire to influence them, to impede the process. Now, the report does not make a traditional prosecutorial decision on obstruction charges against the president, partly due to the long-standing Department of Justice policy against indicting a sitting president, but it lays out extensive factual evidence, lays it out for Congress, for the public to consider. The complexities arise when you frame these actions within the president's broad Article II constitutional powers, like directing investigations or removing officials. The report really grapples with the argument that obstruction statutes should apply if the president acts with that corrupt intent we talked about for personal gain, shielding himself, avoiding embarrassment rather than for legitimate policy reasons. And this principle is vital for you as citizens to consider. Evaluating presidential conduct, thinking about the inherent limits of executive power, reinforcing the idea that no one, not even the president, is above the law when acting with corrupt intent. The evidence laid out invites serious deliberation.
Key takeaways for citizens going forward.
Okay, this has been a really deep dive into these reports. Dense stuff, but it offers invaluable, enduring lessons for us as citizens trying to navigate this information-saturated world. So let's boil it down. What are the most important, actionable takeaways from the CIA's review and the Mueller investigation for us moving forward?
Okay, first, I think, is understanding intelligence limitations and processes. That CIA Tradecraft review, their candid self-assessment, it shows that even the world's most sophisticated intelligence agencies are human institutions. They're susceptible to procedural flaws, time pressures, internal disagreements. For you as a citizen, this means understanding intelligence assessments aren't infallible. They're not delivered from on high, they are products of a process. So the next time you hear a high-confidence assessment, don't just ask, what's the conclusion? Ask, how did they get there? Was the process rigorous, inclusive, or was it rushed during a holiday week?
Right, look at the process, not just the result.
Exactly. That shift in perspective, from accepting findings at face value to scrutinizing the process, is your most powerful tool for informed citizenship and for building trust where it's actually earned. Second, we gain critical insights into recognizing foreign influence tactics. The Mueller report vividly illustrates just how multifaceted modern foreign interference is. From sophisticated social media campaigns sowing discord and favoring candidates, to direct cyber intrusions, strategic information dumps, it's not just one-off hacks. For you, this means developing a high degree of media literacy. You need to be able to discern and resist these influence efforts. Always question the source, the timing, the intent behind information you see, especially online. Understand that adversaries are constantly innovating their methods to manipulate public opinion, using everything from fake grassroots groups to weaponized stolen documents. Vigilance is your first line of defense. Third, it's vital to grasp the difference between legal findings and public perception. The Mueller report's careful distinction between links and coordination. That's a crucial lesson in legal interpretation versus public rhetoric. Just because people connected to a campaign had contacts with foreign actors, or even sought damaging info, doesn't automatically mean a prosecutable criminal conspiracy under U.S. law. For you, this requires carefully reading the details of investigations, understanding legal definitions, resisting the urge to rely only on headlines, political sound bites, or simplified media takes that might misrepresent the findings.
The legal standard is high.
Very high. Due process, high burdens of proof, they're cornerstones of our legal system. Understanding them is key to informed judgment. Fourth, the reports underscore the importance of institutional checks and balances. Those accounts of White House officials like Don McGahn resisting presidential directives. The DOJ's careful navigation of complex legal issues around obstruction. They highlight the quiet but profound resilience of institutional norms and legal processes. This reminds you, as a citizen, of the critical role played by career officials, legal professionals, established procedures in upholding democratic principles, even under extreme pressure. It shows the system has internal mechanisms that can prevent abuses of power, even if they aren't always visible to the public in real time. And finally, these reports really drive home the ongoing importance of accountability and transparency. While the Mueller report, for specific legal reasons, didn't reach a prosecutorial conclusion on obstruction, it meticulously laid out extensive factual evidence of presidential actions toward investigations and witnesses. For you, this underscores the ongoing importance of transparency in government. The ability of independent bodies to investigate and report facts without political interference. This allows the public to draw its own conclusions and ultimately hold power accountable through democratic means. It highlights the power of detailed factual reporting and informing the public and reinforcing democratic oversight, even when direct legal action might not happen.
That was truly a deep dive, uncovering those intricate layers of how intelligence gets formed, how foreign actors try to interfere, and how the highest levels of government respond to intense scrutiny. It's definitely a complex picture, but by understanding these nuances, hopefully you feel better equipped to analyze the news and engage thoughtfully as an informed citizen.
Indeed. And the lessons here, they really extend far beyond just the specifics of 2016. They speak to enduring challenges. Information integrity, executive power, the democratic process itself. They serve as a crucial guide, I think, for navigating future attempts at foreign influence and understanding the inner workings of our government.
So what stands out to you from this deep dive? What further questions does this raise about the systems designed to protect our information and our elections? And how can we as citizens reinforce them through critical thinking and engagement? Something truly significant to mull over as you navigate the news in the days ahead. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another stack of sources to unpack.